Well, Daily Leisure, welcome back. Take 2 of the Koru Research Roundup podcast. And now we're talking about the thorny issue of teacher agency today. A little bit of a shout out to Ceilidh today to say thank you for making it. Not feeling so good. And so thank you for making the effort to join the podcast. It's always worth having you here, though, and your input and insights are invaluable to our listenership. So thanks so much.
No worries. Shout out to all the listeners who have got a very, very husky, slightly snotty version of Ceilidh today. I will do my best, Chris. I'll do my best.
I'm sure even mediocre Ceilidh is better than most. So let's run with it. So we've got this issue of teacher agency that we've read into a little bit in the run up to this episode. And one of the things that sort of sparked my interest was an article in Schools Week by Lisa Maria Müller, who, a little bit of a shout out to the Chartered College of Teaching. She's the Associate Director of Research and Policy there. And very, very noble institute, as it were. You
have something to do with that, don't you, Chris? You have something to do with that.
Yeah. I'm a fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching, and there's some very illustrious company that I'm in. I occasionally have imposter syndrome that when I put the postnomials on my signature. But probably the biggest thing that the Chartered College do is, one, they represent the profession at sort of high-level government talks and things like that, but they also put out some really great research and so on. I'm lucky enough to be part of their editorial team, so I pick up some of their articles before they go live and give feedback and review on them, and that's a great insight into some of the stuff that's going on in our profession and also some of the thinking that's going on in the background behind it. So I'm not at the lofty level of Lisa Maria Müller, I'll be honest with you. So yeah, she's done this article for Schools Week, and it's all about the importance of teacher agency. And it struck a chord with me. There's a few other research pieces that we'll address today, but I think to start with, maybe if we just address that question of what we actually mean by teacher agency, and then we can start to talk about whether it's desirable and whether we actually deliver on it, and what are the risks and so on with it. But what do you understand from that term, teacher agency, Ceilidh?
So I found all of this reading that's super interesting, to be honest. And I think the core idea at the center of teacher agency is this idea that teachers have a belief that their actions, their decisions, their classroom practices, whether that's individually or kind of collectively as a team within their school, can and do positively influence their practice, the student learning experience, and kind of a broader educational context. So it's kind of more about your belief that you are doing something good and valuable, and that you are making a difference and making a change.
Probably the sort of fundamental reason that underpins why most of us entered the profession. At least most of us that should be there. The whole idea of it. So yeah, this article talks about this idea of why we need agency to thrive. That's the title. Teachers need agency to thrive, and the article explores how and why. What's your take on that in terms of the value of teacher agency? And is it just a way of palming off workload onto people, or is it a way of giving them real autonomy in their work that creates real value?
No, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said this is the reason why a lot of us kind of went into teaching. You know, when we sit around the table and people, I don't know, tell us, well, you knew what you were getting into with all the bad things. This was also one of the reasons why we got into what we were doing. Call it a quite romantic view. But I believe and I still do believe that my actions, my decisions, my pedagogy, call it what you will, can and do make a difference. And I do think that I hate to say it, but I do think that this landscape has eroded over the last few decades for various reasons. I think now people are realizing that this agency that we were promised when we started when we started our careers just isn't there anymore. And there are lots of problems with that. There's lots of hyper accountability has meant that we don't have the what am I looking for? I'm reaching and I'm not giving you the words.
We're looking at that idea. I think there's an irony here that hyper accountability model that we have has eroded that concept of agency amongst teachers. But ironically enough, if you look at the educational landscape from a sort of business perspective or a managerial level or a board level, we've actually, particularly in the UK, but elsewhere around the world, we've had greater levels of autonomy within schools. We've had the concept of free schools. We've had academization here in the UK, etc., etc. And at that level, we've actually seen that greater level of agency, but arguably around business side of it and the commercials, and it's but down at the classroom level, that I think you're absolutely right. That concept of agency has largely been eroded, removed. We have standardized testing. We have standardized expectations of what we see in a classroom. We've got the Ofsted framework, etc., etc., and we work to that. And I think part of the thing that squeezes that creativity out of the classroom is workload. And you could argue that that's a cynical step in order to prevent dissent.
Yeah, and I think this links to the podcast that we did a couple of months ago where we were looking at, I don't know, the capitalist business model and power in education and how there has been this shift. I think we're seeing, we spoke a lot about that, and we're seeing a different element, a different side to that, where the profession and us as professionals, our agency has slowly been eroded and is continuing to be so. There might be more freedom at the top, but there's much less freedom at the bottom.
Well, here's a question for anyone listening, anyone that's in leadership, in a leadership role. Do you think that you provide real opportunity for teacher agency in your school and in your environment? Or if you reflect on it, do you think you control what they do on a day-to-day basis, maybe as much or maybe more than is healthy? It's a question worth thinking about, reflecting on, and we'd love to hear your thoughts if you're listening. I think there's another interesting tension in all of this. A lot of the work we do in classes as teachers, and a lot of the work that's deemed to be successful, is creating agency for youngsters. We give them the chance to explore. We do exploratory learning. We give them the opportunity to make mistakes. All of those kind of things. We develop that idea. We encourage risk taking. It's even built into learner profiles and the like. Yet when it comes to staffing and professional obligations, we're not really prepared to pick up that baton and run with it. We don't encourage risk taking. We don't encourage those kind of choices. We look for standardized ideas very often, and eccentricity is more and more difficult to find in our classrooms. Is that a good thing or not? I wonder.
I personally don't think so. I think the teacher agency and voice is really important. Both as in the article, for retention. We know that we are in a teacher retention crisis. The OECD have said that there are only, I think, 3 other nations that have a similar situation to us in terms of teacher retention. So we are doing quite badly for that. But I would also argue that I'm not entirely sure that we are allowing our learners much agency. I think we don't have the time for it. If it looks like there's going to be the right outcome, we might give them a little slack. But I think across the whole, we're looking for one answer most of the time.
We've got to get through the exam material. We've got to get through the syllabus.
There's got to be a check. There's a check that we've got to get these sounds, and these sounds have got to be learned, and they've got to be learned in this order. And we've got to, we're constantly on this treadmill, or the Czechs have a wonderful phrase about being the hamster in the wheel. You know, that everything is just running constantly, and we're trying to keep up. And I think that's also the case, I think, for a lot of our students.
I wonder how many teachers would that concept of the hamster in the wheel would resonate with. Probably all of them, I suspect, at one point or another. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one, and it actually goes to the heart of what education is here. Do we really need to be imparting all this knowledge to students, and do they need to be retaining it at all? Or, you know, knowledge, historically, knowledge used to be it was maintained in books or in the preserve of subject experts. But knowledge is ubiquitous. You're carrying a supercomputer around in your pocket as a phone, and you can access that information. You know, Siri can tell you all sorts of different things that within a few seconds. Do we actually need those subject experts, and do we need to be covering that curriculum material for anything other than just the purpose of our system? Has the system become the objective rather than an avenue to something more meaningful? And I wonder about that, and I wonder if that whole process of focusing on that and getting through that, it erodes that agency, because we are stuck in that treadmill.
Well, no, potentially. And I think that is, I don't know, I feel like that goes back to AI and kind of like the conversations we've had as to whether, you know, there are, what is valuable to be taught in education now. And I think that the fact that we can have these discussions because we have, you know, the teacher voice to be able to do it, means that we have some agency as to what, you know, you and I, what we are doing, what we are teaching. And I just hope that within, you know, staff rooms and staff meetings, and, you know, within teachers, that they are also able to have these conversations, these decisions, and be heard, because that's the whole point. Otherwise, you know, it becomes a bit of a soul destroying exercise of just recreating what somebody else is telling us to.
Yeah, and interestingly, if you can put up with that, then arguably you shouldn't be in the classroom at all. You know, if you can put up with that agency being eroded, then actually it's you're not the right person to be inspiring youngsters, I guess. Interestingly enough, the article in Schools Week, and I'll give a little bit of a shout out to Educationscape, who own and run Schools Week. They run all of the festivals of education around the world, and there's some great people that work there, and they do great work. If you do get the chance to go to one of the festivals, they're great fun, and there's some very erudite, interesting speakers there. I think the next one, they've got them in Holland, Spain, and also in the UK, Shanghai, Bangkok, and they're definitely worth a visit. The article in Schools Week talks about agency being key for well-being, recruitment and retention, and clearly there are issues that are at play at the moment. And I think that you had something to say around the sort of retention side of it when we did our take one of this this podcast. Do you want to take us through some of that? Why is it important to teacher recruitment and retention?
Well, I think we touched on this a little bit in the introduction. It's one of the reasons why I think we gain job satisfaction for what we do. The likelihood of a teacher staying in the profession, because it's not, you know, beautifully well paid and the hours kind of suck, and we're dealing with a lot of complex decision making and need, and, you know, it really is, you know, teaching is one of the most complicated jobs that you can do right now, and a lot of it is intrinsically linked to this idea of agency, of you believing that you are valued and you can make a difference, because without that, the incentives to stay and to do a good job just aren't there. And I think a lot of, you know, we know that teachers are extremely overworked. That's just well documented at this point. But I think it's not just the overwork that's leading to a lot of our teachers leaving. It's also the lack of trust to do to do your professional duty, to do your job,
Mm.
that is driving teachers away from staying. We've kind of got this, perfect storm of a lack of trust, a lack of agency, a huge amount of work, underpay. It's a perfect storm in the UK right now.
Are you cynical enough to believe that the workload is intentionally set at such a level to help subdue dissent, etc., or do you think that's just an inadvertent outcome of other things?
Usually I'm all for anything kind of.
I suspect you would have been one of the first at the barricades had you lived in France at the relevant time. I want to say 17th century, but I think it was at the 18th century, the revolution.
18th century, 1770. So it was just after the American, 1770s. So the 1780s, 90s. My French friends are going to hate me for not knowing the exact.
Oh, they can hate me more because I got it more wrong than you did. But I suspect you would have been at the barricades with your beret and your little rosette thing.
Usually I'm fully behind a power theory. In this sense, I don't think it is. I think that we're a bit of it's become the frog in the pot, where people have just sat and things have been added and added and added, and the temperature has risen and risen, and instead of rioting like the French, we've sat and boiled in our own juices until it's become impossible for new people to join the profession without jumping out straight away. I think that's kind of what we've got.
There's a really nice bit of research, and it's published by Routledge, and it's about Portuguese teachers and their experience, and all of these will be on the show notes that go with the episode. Published in the Cambridge Journal of Education in 2025, and it talks about reclaiming professional agency. And I really like this because it talked about the sort of the gradual creep of managerialism and how that commercial focus has driven that agency out of the classroom, and how teachers are trying to claim it back, and whether they're being successful in that. And there's an awful lot in there about that concept of managerialism, and the drive towards it. And it's interesting because when it's talking about that, it's talking about things that we would just accept as being normal, acceptable, as reasonable, professional standards frameworks, things like that, sort of passive policy implement, as they call it. And they talk about those sort of regulatory frameworks, whatever they happen to be. And it's really fascinating that those things that we see, governance strategy, etc., professional standards frameworks, lesson observation frameworks, all of that kind of stuff that we look to and lean on as teachers. And actually, it's saying that that's driving you towards that managerialism and away from that agency. And inevitably, that has to be a top-down approach. And if I've learned many things from my friend Shane Leaning as I've worked with him. But one of the consistencies that we talk about is that change never really works if it's top down. At best, you get cynical compliance rather than genuine buy-in with top down stuff. I just wonder if that's what we've sort of created with that drive towards managerialism and away from that idea of teacher agency.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is part of this article is looking at the micro level of teachers in the classroom, but then the kind of meso and then the macro level. And I think all of those kind of layers of the onion effectively do kind of work together to create this idea of agency and professionalism, and call it what you will. And I want to have a romantic view of teachers and of education as a whole, but I do also recognize that there is some need for top-down things. There is a need for balance. Not all teachers are created equal. I would love it if we were. um, but sometimes there does need to be there needs to be some checks and balances in place. But if you can get that kind of bottom-up autonomy happening as well, then you get a much better buy-in for anything like that that's coming through. People will accept help if it comes kind of a bit more organically.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I think we've addressed some of those questions and about what teacher agency is. I think we recognize that it's absolutely desirable, and we recognize that perhaps it's maybe under threat rather than necessarily being taken out of our professional sort of discourse, as it were, but it's maybe something that's under threat, perhaps by virtue of workload, amongst other things. So what are the solutions, Ceilidh? What do you see the solutions? How can we bring teacher agency back into the classroom, perhaps without prejudicing some of the positives that we get from those frameworks, that accountability, and maybe sort of helping avoid that all teachers aren't created equal? That is quote of the month for me. I think we might use that as the headline for the episode.
Oh no. Yeah, so I think yeah, there is this tension between, you know, wanting for things to be good and standardized and measurable and tick boxable, because then you know you're doing a good job, or managers know they're doing a good job, but also teacher agency. And there is a third kind of element in my head to this, which is like evidence-informed practice. So I think in the article it said, you know, teachers need agency more than they need, you know, CPD training. And I think teachers need both. Because in order to know that you're doing a good job as a professional, you need to be continuing to learn and develop and grow and engaging with, you know, evidence-informed practice. So I think we need to trust our teachers and trust that they are doing that, and we need to allocate them the time and the resources to make it so. We need that to come from the bottom up. We need to, yeah, decide that they are doing a good job, and this is how they're going to continue to do a good job. And teachers the time and the resources to be able to engage with that research.
Yeah, I mean, it always comes down to resource choice and decision and things like that, and that's perhaps where the sort of commercial tension arises, I guess. That though a lot of those things that we value as professional teachers that are really committed to our work are maybe not always the metrics that are easily measurable, and certainly providing agency will generate a series of positive outcomes that no one will ever be able to measure appropriately.
Then that's the problem. If you just have a tick box model, then you can't measure what doesn't fit in a box. And I think, yeah, a lot of things in the classroom, because we're dealing with humans, and most of them quite small humans, which don't play by the rules in any way, shape, or form. It makes it harder.
Yeah. So I always find it interesting that there is that desire to sort of create rules, regulations, and frameworks and so forth for a classroom environment, which is essentially where you're making many hundreds of decisions all the time that you're working. People wonder why teaching is excruciatingly tiring, and it's because you're making all of those decisions all of the time and trying to get most of them right. And you know that where you get them wrong, there will inevitably be some level of accountability, and it can create you quite a headache. And that whole thing there, that agency, how can you legislate for that level of decision making through your working day? Well, you can't. I think perhaps you're right. You touched on that idea of resource, and also the idea that we need to have that trust in our teachers and that willingness to allow them to explore those ideas. But you're right, it does come with a risk, doesn't it? That if we let teachers run by themselves, then some are going to be doing a great job and some are going to be doing a good job, and some will have the odd off day, and some will be perennially bad at what they do. And how do you manage that as a school leader? Do you tolerate that in the for the greater good of having that teacher agency going on in your school? It's an interesting debate.
It is a very interesting debate. But I think the alternative, the tick box, the tick box friendly alternative clearly isn't working. It's not functioning. And so sometimes, I mean, I'm not saying throw the whole thing, baby out with the bathwater and all that jazz, but sometimes you have to recognize when there's a systemic change that is needed. And I think this might be one of them.
I'm all in favor of it. I would equate this to the debate around kind of, should we allow people that swing the lead around benefits, for example, claim benefits, or should we really tighten up the system? And I would rather that all of the people that were worthy of benefit and support got it, even if that meant a few people that were swinging the lead slipped through the net and also benefited from it. I would much rather that. So in a similar sense here, I'd rather that we encourage the agency, allow that to happen, and perhaps look to manage those areas where it wasn't working quite so well in some places. But that's not a reason to get rid of agency just because we're going to have challenging areas of where it doesn't really work that well.
I really like that analogy, actually. That makes sense, because actually when we think about, I don't know, if we think about the headlines in certain newspapers about, benefit fraud or whatever, the amount of money that is lost to that is a drop in the ocean compared to what we lose through other kind of, I don't know, tax evasion, for example. And so if you look at like the lesser of two evils, if you look at this in a very similar way, losing teacher agency is losing us respect as a profession. It's losing us new teachers. It's losing us, good pedagogy. It's losing, the heart and soul of the classroom. Whereas if we go the other way and allow the agency and then learn how to manage that, we might still get a couple of bad eggs. That's going to happen. Well,
we will, but we've got them anyway.
But we've got them, exactly. We've got them anyway. It's just we have them on a sheet, ticking them off as being bad eggs. I'm with you.
We mustn't name those bad eggs that we know. By the way, Ceilidh, just to be clear.
Me, I don't know any bad eggs. None whatsoever.
I think we before we finish, we should mention the research that you flagged up from the OECD data about the teacher retention crisis and how agency feeds into that. And I think that the magnitude of this was quite shocking to me. So I'll throw that over to you to touch on.
So that was this research that there are three other countries that have a teacher retention crisis similar to ours. I'm going to misquote them because I've forgotten it. Latvia, Estonia, and Denmark, I want to say, is the other country.
Mark in my head.
Are the only other three within all the OECDs that have a similar or a worse teacher retention situation. And Denmark surprised me, but there have been some shifts. There have been some shifts in government and policy into all sorts of stuff over the last few years. So it surprises me, but doesn't surprise me.
It's an interesting one. But perhaps a bit more teacher agency, a little more trust. Perhaps that could drive us towards a better environment for our teachers and maybe a better environment for our pupils and sons and daughters, as it were. And perhaps giving that agency is a useful message to the kids in the classroom as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, listen, I'm not going to prolong your agony any further, Ceilidh. I know that you've come here under duress, and I'm very grateful for it.
It's all good. I'm sorry. Next time I will be better. I will be less sick. It will all be good.
So thank you so much for your time. Always good to talk to you. And if there's any opinions out there about teacher agency, we would love to hear from you. So put some comments up there. Do repost the podcast if you can. and maybe take a look at korueducation.uk to see what we do. We do some work around this, and we'd love to be involved with your school. Yeah, take care. Bye now.